Alright, so this is a grade 9 lesson for Unit A, Biological Diversity, talking about chromosomes and DNA specifically. Later on in the lesson it would go into mitosis as well, but for the 20 minutes it'll be chromosomes and DNA. So, as you guys come into class today, you'll notice on your desks you have an activity here. I want you to take a couple of minutes and just fill this out. Now, I understand that you probably won't know all the answers to these questions, but these are just kind of to see what you know about DNA and chromosomes right now, and we're going to go over these principles and we'll make corrections to our work later. Okay? So this is not for marks, this is just to see what you think. So take a few minutes and go ahead. So how many people need a little bit more time? A few of you? Okay. Looks like most people are wrapping up, which looks good. So, like I mentioned, the purpose of this activity is just to get you thinking a little bit. A lot of people talk about DNA and chromosomes and genes, and they don't always necessarily understand what they mean. People talk about their genetics being responsible for things like diseases or different characteristics like hair color and eye color and all of those kind of things. Without really knowing what exactly that means. And so we're going to look a little bit more at what a gene really is, and what DNA is, and what chromosomes are, and how those relate to normal growth and function in the body. So just now to follow up with this activity, we're going to watch a brief video here. If you have any questions, make sure you write them down and we can discuss them later. They're going to use a few terms here that we'll explain as we go throughout the lecture, but just pay attention and this will provide an introduction for us. Let's slide this back. Alright. Oh, it doesn't want to. Let's quickly get this up and going again. To work on the first time, does it? Alright, here we go. We'll go full screen.
DNA is made with 4 chemicals called nitrogen bases. They are adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. Adenine and thymine always pair together, as do guanine and cytosine. A single combination of adenine and thymine, or guanine and cytosine, is called a base pair. Genes are long chains of these base pairs, sometimes hundreds of thousands of pairs long. The sequence of a gene will usually be represented by a series of the letters A, G, C, and T in what looks like a random order. There's nothing random about it. The sequence of a gene is a precise and complex code. The full set of these codes for any creature is called its genome, and the codes determine what an organism is and the difference between it and all other living things. A very complex code indeed. Every living organism, large or small, simple or complex, is made up of cells. Some organisms are only one cell, and some are made of billions of cells. Within each cell of any creature are its chromosomes. These contain a complete set of that organism's genes. This is a molecule of the protein insulin. Each gene codes for a specific protein. This is a molecule of the protein hemoglobin, which carries oxygen in our blood. When an organism needs a specific protein, the gene unwinds and creates a copy of itself out of RNA. This is called transcription. That messenger RNA leaves the cell nucleus and proceeds to the cytoplasm, where it finds the cell's protein factories called ribosomes. The ribosomes read the RNA messenger and manufacture the protein coded there. This is called translation. The protein then goes to where it's needed, either inside or outside the cell. It's the thousands of proteins made by thousands of genes that cause everything in any organism, us included, to live and function properly. Genes are responsible for defense against disease, strategies for procreation and survival, shape, size, smell, color, sex. These are some of the traits determined by genes. And when you put a gene into an organism, you give it the trait encoded in that gene.
All right, so there was a lot in that video, but we're going to talk about every part of it over the next couple of days. And there was a little bit of a review in there from our grade 8 science, learning about cells and the different structures inside cells. So let's start at the very most basic level. So the video talked about the most basic structure of DNA, and they called them nitrogen bases. I'm going to give you a different word to describe them, and based on this word, we'll see if we can figure out where it is. So the word is nucleic acid, okay? And in the video they use the term bases, okay? So when we look at the term nucleic acid, what do you think when you see the term nucleic acid? What structure in the cell does it remind you of?
The nucleus?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. The nucleus, okay? So that gives us a hint as to where our DNA is, okay? Our DNA exists in the nucleus. Now they listed 4 nucleic acids, they represented them by letters. So they gave A, and we're not going to worry about the names right now, we're just going to worry about the letters. So they gave us A and T, C, and G, okay? Everybody remembers that? That's not a very good G. Alright. So, now can anyone remember from the video, these bind together and form pairs, but only certain ones bind together. Can you remember which ones bind together?
A and T.
Okay. A and T bind together. left. C and G bind together, okay? So, it's important that we realize this, okay? Because a lot of times, we might think that DNA just binds randomly together in random pairs, okay? So in the video they showed that you can have a nice long sequence of DNA. So you can have, sorry, let me get my pens ready here. So you can have A, C, G, T, and these can come in any order, but it's not a random order, okay? It is a specific order, okay? Let's just draw a random DNA sequence here for ourselves. Okay, now I'll give you a second to copy this sequence because we're going to actually use this sequence here in a second to make sure we understand. Okay, so he talked in the video about base pairs, okay? And so if we have a strand of these nucleic acids that are all kind of bound together in a long string, does that compose a gene? What do you think?
No.
Is that enough? No, okay? We need the complementary pairs beside it, okay? So let's go through, now that you've written this brief sequence in your notebook, and let's read out the complementary sequence. So what is going to go here?
T,
T. What's next?
G,
Shout them out. G,
C,
C,
A, C, A, G, G, T.
G, G, T. Perfect. Okay. So these individuals are nucleic acids, okay? Nucleic acids are the individual bases, okay? So these are base pairs, okay? Base pairs. Now segments of base pairs, that is what we call genes, okay? Now these genes can vary in length, you know, some are really, really long, some are really, really short. It all depends, okay? And we'll talk about why the length matters in a little more detail, and you learn a lot about that actually in high school biology. So together, a group of base pairs equals a gene. Okay, so at this point, let's take a look at our worksheet here. And I want you to look at your answers. And based on just what we've talked about right here so far, we've talked about individual nucleic acids, we've talked about how they make base pairs, and how those base pairs make a gene, okay? I want you to look and see if there are any answers on your worksheet that you would like to change, okay? And if there are, just make sure that you make that change with a different color, alright? So you can see the difference, okay? We'll be going over the answers to these afterwards, but I just want you to think about this and maybe try to make these changes yourself, okay? So I'll give you 1 minute to do that. We haven't covered everything on the sheet either, so just the ones that you think are relevant, what we've talked about so far. changes? Everybody's ready to move on? Okay. So, if I were to then ask you to give me a definition of what a gene is, what would you say? Who can give me a definition of a gene?
Group of base pairs.
Okay, perfect. Now, this group of base pairs, or this gene, is going to be responsible for a characteristic, okay? And that's what the video talked about, right? The difference between me and you and everybody else, and the difference between us and all sorts of other animals and plants and different things is we all have different genes. We all have a different code or a different sequence, okay? That's kind of hinted here in the definitions that I gave you at the start of this worksheet. Genetic information is the code that determines what makes us up, right? So we have a code that tells us that I have brown hair and you have blonde hair, you know. The color of our eyes, how tall we are, all of those different kind of things. Genes and the specific code that is in those genes helps determine that. There's other things that determine it too, but genes are really important, okay? And so a gene, you can say, is responsible for a characteristic, okay? So then, let's talk about the next order up, okay? So we have, just represented by our picture here, we have a group of base pairs. We have a bunch of different genes. Who can remember from the video what a strand, what a bunch of different genes together makes? What's the next order up?
DNA.
Okay, so DNA, this is DNA right here. The base pairs are made of DNA, okay? Does that make sense? I guess I needed to explain that a little bit better, okay? So nucleic acids are what make up DNA. Nucleic acid makes DNA, okay? So a group of genes together, on going, right? And again, this is all dependent on size. A group of genes together is what we call a chromosome, okay? And there's actually pictures of chromosomes on your worksheet. Pictures on the bottom, on the far right, those are human chromosomes. Okay, so you can see there, they're kind of bunched up and all together, but you can see there that they're long strands, and within these long strands, you have a group of genes. Within each gene, you have a group of base pairs, and each base pair is made up of a single strand of individual nucleic acids, okay? And so when it's time, for example, when when it's time for your body to determine its hair color, example, for when when you're growing in your mom's stomach as a baby, then certain genes, the body knows, the cells know where to go in each chromosome. They know that they need to target a specific gene, and then they can make copies of this gene. And they can use this gene to then determine what your hair color is. When it's time for you to grow fingers, same thing. It'll come to the finger gene and it'll say, okay, we need to do this. We need to copy this gene. We need to make lots of this gene. And then we can use that and we can make fingers. It's the same for everything, okay? So proper functioning genes on chromosomes are important for normal growth and development. So what do you think happens when a gene, say for example, something were to happen and the sequence were to get messed up, okay? Let's say if we change that A to a G. This is what's known as a mutation, okay? And this can happen, right? I know that T's and A's only bind together, but sometimes mistakes happen and the wrong ones bind together. This creates what's known as a mutation, okay? So a mutation is something that will that will alter growth and development, all right? And so things like diseases, right? Diseases are caused by mutations in the genes, okay? So the gene can either get knocked out completely, or it can have a decreased function. There's lots of different things that can happen to these genes, but that's what happens when normal growth and development is hindered. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions at this point about the structure of DNA? Okay. So now we're going to move on into how the DNA functions within the cell itself. But that is all that I have for this portion of the lesson. It's just the structure of DNA.